Talking about this, House Democrats say they are likely to investigate White House advisor and first daughter Ivanka Trump for using private email to conduct government business.
I bet you, Mika, they don't investigate it as aggressively as the Republicans investigated Hillary Clinton. And I suspect you're not going to see a lot of Democratic crowds chanting, "Lock her up."
Never. That's...
No.
This after her lawyer says an internal review found scores of emails about policy and official business, with hundreds more relating to scheduling, meetings, and travel in possible violation of records law. The Microsoft-stored personal domain was set up in December of 2016 for Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, who's also an assistant to the president, whose use of personal email for government business was first uncovered by Politico last year, after liberal watchdog American Oversight posted images of Trump's emails obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. A spokesman for her lawyer said a review with the White House counsel began in September of 2017, quote, while transitioning into government until the White House provided her the same guidance they had to others who started before she did. Ms. Trump sometimes used her private account, almost always for logistics and scheduling concerning her family.
How do we know that? We don't know that, actually.
To address misinformation being peddled about Ms. Trump's personal email, she did not create a private server in her house or office. There was never...
But hold on, that's irrelevant. She created an email account, a domain account with her husband right before she went to the White House, which is what Hillary Clinton did as well.
Well, that seems like a thought-out act.
Hillary Clinton set up a system where she could move personal emails. Now, whether the server was at home or whether it was somewhere else actually seems very irrelevant to the fact that the intent was to set up a new private email account
in 2016?
In 2016, before going into the White House.
Weren't they screaming "lock her up" about the emails?
They were actually for a year and a half. They also claimed there was never any classified information transmitted.
Right.
Look, Gene Robinson, let me go to you. This is sounding awfully familiar. That's exactly what Hillary Clinton said at the UN press conference. Nobody trusted her. It's not the press's responsibility to trust a politician or somebody in the White House when they say something, and it's certainly not the responsibility of the press to trust the attorney for a public figure who tells us we've released all the information that's relevant, which is what Abbe Lowell said, and that's also what Cheryl Mills said. Nobody in the press or the Republican Party trusted them, said, well, thank you, we'll verify, actually. Same thing with classified information. We don't know. But we knew one thing, Gene. Ivanka Trump was on notice. Jared Kushner was on notice. The entire Trump administration was on notice that this was a violation of public record laws.
And why were they on notice? Because we had just gone through month after month after month of harping on Hillary Clinton's emails and what she did, and the fact that she ran her email correspondence through this private domain. And so how could she not know? Of course she knew. And the thing that just gets me about the story, December 2016. I mean, you know, getting ready to go into the White House, this is a willful, deliberate violation of what she had to know, unless, and frankly, unless she's dumb as a brick, she had to know that that this was a violation. It's just stunning. And now Abbe Lowell says, in effect, trust us. We've gone through and we've weeded through and we've made sure that there was nothing untoward and no classified information and no this and that. It's just scheduling, and no one could possibly believe that without verification.
Right. And by the way, everybody knows she's brilliant. To ask her father, he'll tell you how brilliant Ivanka Trump is and what schools she went to. She went to great schools. So yeah, very intelligent woman. She knew better. Susan Del Percio, I will now ask the shortest question in the history of Morning Joe, which is not even a question. It's 2 words, you respond. The hypocrisy.
It is, and of course there needs to be a thorough investigation as to what was done, what was her classification for confidential documents versus maybe her husband's if they shared that information. But the other thing that's really interesting here, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of, besides it's so easy to go after her on the emails, is that it shows that this family believes that they get to play by one set of rules that is different from everybody else. And not showing the tax returns is the same type of thing. Not showing where you may have a conflict of interest is no different than deciding which emails that you're going to give to the government when they realize you have your own server. And that's the one thing I'd like to see some consistency from in these investigations. I don't think they need to be blown out of control. I think that these are really easy things to do. And let's see what rules the Trumps are playing by.
So, Eddie, it's one of the first rules of modern by modern I mean since the email came into our lives, of politics and of government business on government email.
Right.
People know that. And Ivanka Trump is a smart woman. She knows it well. And let's put it into that context, coming just right on the back of an election in November of 2016. A lot of this began reportedly during the transition of the Hillary Clinton email affair, of lock her up, of crooked Hillary. The thrust of the Trump campaign was all that Hillary was corrupt because she had a private server in her house in Chappaqua.
I mean, you know, at the heart of this is the idea that, I mean, we're attributing that the critique of Hillary Clinton was principled and that it wasn't politically motivated. That's the first thing we're assuming. And let's assume that's true. But what we see here with Ivanka Trump and what we see with Donald Trump more generally is that they don't care about the rules. They only care about themselves. They don't play by the rules. They play by their own rules. It's almost if we've elected a bunch of plutocrats who think they could do whatever the hell they want to do.
Because they don't understand the system. They don't even.
No, that's a generous read.
It is generous,
They
but
do understand, but they don't care.
I mean,
Okay, but hold
They
1 second, though.
understand.
Here's the deal. I mean, we have said time and again, Eddie, that so much of what Donald Trump does is just out of ignorance. He's never read history. He's never understood history. He's never cared to understand history. He still doesn't care to understand history or what constitutional norms are or what a president can and cannot do, what a president should and should not do. But in this case, you bring up a great point. They knew. They knew because they were leading chance for 1.5 years to imprison a political opponent because she used a private email server for public business. In fact, Donald Trump brought it up at the second debate, said he was going to get an independent counsel to investigate it, said he was going to lock her up. There is no way. They're ignorant. These Trumps. They don't understand government. They never did understand government. They don't care to understand government. I know firsthand. They think they're smarter than everybody else. That they are not chained to history. Well, they are. But in this case, she knew better. And she chose to break the law anyway. You're exactly right.
You know, and you know, at some point, ignorance, I think in this instance, Joe, you're absolutely right. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she did it anyway. And in the context of Donald Trump not knowing, ignorance of the law is no excuse. You know, in some ways, we're constantly letting him off the hook because we say he doesn't know. Well, that's not true. We're not letting him off the hook. We kind of excuse him in some ways because of his ignorance. I want to suggest that there's a way in which he operates that is just generally selfish, that's always self-interested. He's going to try to find an end around, and whether he knows or not, he's going to act.
Right. And I wasn't saying it as an excuse.
Right.
What I meant to get at is that this is what happens when you elect someone who is simply not qualified for the job.
Absolutely.
I mean, this goes into a bigger picture. Yes, of course, Ivanka Trump. Everyone knew about email issues, but this is why electing someone who is not capable and does not understand how government works is so dangerous, and why we find ourselves where we are today is because this man, like Joe said, has no regard for history, has no regard for the law, does not care to understand any principle or any of America's values. He just goes off with whatever comes off the top of his head.
Absolutely.
I talked to a Washington, D.C. native last night, watching Donald Trump speaking, and his comment to me was, we seriously, out of all the people that ever thought about running for president of the United States, we elected the man least qualified and the most ignorant of how government
it's amazing.
runs. It really is quite remarkable who the American people voted for in 2016. Of course, he lost a popular vote by almost 3 million votes, and he'll never get elected to anything again. Still, though, remarkable that he was elected. But thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.